Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
A Time for Truth show is sponsored by the Office of Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, a periodontal, dental implant and laser specialist in New York City, for over 40 years. Dr. Fialkoff was honored by the International College of Dentists and Pierre Fauchard, and received the Presidential Lifetime Humanitarian Honor from the White House. Call us at 718-229-3838.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to A Time for Truth show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and it's a pleasure to have you back with us again. Many of you have been asking, how do I avail myself of the previous episodes? Very simple. Go on YouTube, A Time for Truth show. Click on the subscribe. There'll be no fee to you. We'll be happy to have you as one of our members. And tonight we're going to cover something that's actually crucial, that's essential. Because when you encounter difficulties in life, you need that person who's going to help you. You need to have sound advice. And I don't know about you, but in the last few years, sometimes there's a quandary and there's a confusion and chaos of what is true, what is not true, which way should you go. And so tonight we have a very special guest, and Buddha, if you put his pictures up on the screen, we'll introduce to you Attorney Manuel Portela, member of the American Bar Association, the New York State Criminal Defense Association, and AILA, and recognized as top attorney by the Expert Network. And he founded the Portela Law Firm in 1995. There you see him on the screen. The firm, which now celebrates 3 offices in Manhattan, the Bronx, and Queens, has an emergency hotline that hopefully you won't need, but if you do, 917-774-9617 for those facing arrest, immigration detentions, emergency circumstances. Portela is distinguished for criminal defense, for immigration, for family law, for personal injury, and his background includes honors graduation from Fordham and Juris Doctorate degree from the Washington College of Law in Washington, D.C. He served as senior editor of the International Law Journal and worked for the Federal Reserve Bank. We probably need him again there, with what's going on. And as examiner, and was assistant district attorney for Kings County District Society, sector, whatever, in New York City, as senior trial attorney for 5 years. His firm's cases have been featured in the New York Times, Daily News, The Post, Long Island Newsday, Bloomberg News, Crain's New York, Telemundo, El Diario, and we could go on and on and on, but we won't have a show if we continue. So we've got to cut down and actually get to him and speak with him. There's much we have to cover. He's recognized, as I told you, as a top attorney in North America with extensive training in the Criminal Court Bureau, Early Assessment Bureau, Felony Investigation Bureau, and Supreme Court Bureau. And it's my pleasure to welcome, and Buddha, if we'll bring him up live next to me, to Manuel Portela, to A Time for Truth show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, my honor, my pleasure. You know, my friend Buddha recommended you, talked a lot about you. And what I wanted to ask you is, many times in life, there are reasons why we pick what we do. What was it that led you to become an attorney?
Well, it was during my adolescent years when I was a young kid, and I was reading quite a bit of fiction. Back then, I was a target of bullying at school. And I think everyone has experienced some degree of bullying at some point or other in life. At the time, I was reading a book, fiction, about a young boy who was bullied and ended up being the victim of a crime. And the district attorney did its investigation and prosecuted the person who had bullied him and had done injury. In the meantime, he started developing self-defense techniques, taking classes, and he learned how to defend himself. He ultimately prevailed as the victim of the case. The district attorney did the due sentence. And then later on in life, he came across this bully and ended up committing a crime himself against the bully. And then the whole story turned around, and the prosecutor who was prosecuting the bully ended up becoming a defense attorney later on in life. And so that's where the story left off. So this fascinated me, the whole idea of, first of all, caught my attention with respect to the bullying aspect, but then later on in life, the importance of the role an attorney can play in the lives of people, especially if it deals with criminal defense, family law, immigration, even personal injury. These are events and circumstances that happen in life that can ultimately, eventually have real long-lasting effects. And if there's an attorney or someone that can guide the way and at the same time provide adequate representation in a manner, zealous representation in a manner that's within the bounds of the law to come forth in front of a judicial system and defend that person, that's what really appealed to me. And that's the reason why I decided to pursue law. And it was a long, arduous task, but eventually I got there. So I was very happy at the end.
Well, congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
And second of all, as I listen to you, I've had a lot of guests on the show, I can see that you have a real care and compassion. And my question to you is, when you get clients and they come in and you get them from all walks of life, this is very interesting. I noticed that you don't really select out or just go for the famous or whatever. What is the way, your philosophy of how you treat your clients, your procedure? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. First of all, we've had clients from all walks of life, from professional football players to artists that appear on TV to regular folk. And I would say that every person deserves the respect and the dignity, whether you are just have a job that deals with everyday lives. Everybody's job is important. And so really I give everyone the same amount of dignity, respect, and attention, regardless of what walk of life they come by. And our offices were purposely opened in the communities. We're in Washington Heights, Jackson Heights, and in an area in the Bronx. And we aren't on Fifth Avenue. We're not on Wall Street. We're in the community, and
so where the people live.
Where the people live, and where the people really, the only way you can really represent a person, in my opinion, not the only way, but an important way, is to really understand their culture, their circumstances, their challenges, and overall their experience living here in the United States, whether they're an immigrant or whether they're a U.S. citizen that's been here for very many different generations. I think it's important to understand, and especially if they're arrested in the county where they live in, it's important to understand that. And so that's one of the benefits in being in a community-based law practice. And I always represent myself as a small practice in representing a demographic that represents the community in the different areas of New York City.
That's beautiful. I myself started in Jackson Heights.
Yeah.
On 37th Avenue.
Yeah.
And so I know what you mean. And, as a dentist, we had those old chairs, with a little little half dome, and I look upon it now, and with humor. But I understand what you're saying, because those real people in my office in Bayside now. It's like a UN of people, and I enjoy treating, I wouldn't say the common man, but the real people, because those are the people that make our world go, and that New York, which is a melting pot.
Our economy could not generate with everyone, and I would say that really what makes up my practice is what represents the average New Yorker.
Right, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And now, you've got 3 offices. You're a very humble guy. I see you're very down to earth. What do you attribute all your success to?
The common, which I think a lot of people can relate to, is the confronting challenges and at the same time experiencing failure along the way and trying to pick yourself right back up. And so the more challenges you confront, the more failure you face, that you deal with, and the more you can pick yourself up, the more resilient you become in being successful. And I'm not saying that I am successful. I'm just saying that this is an experience that allowed me to take steps more towards being a successful person. And so I would say that whatever challenge or whatever hope or goal someone has, to go for it, and then to, no matter what, don't let anyone convince you otherwise, and then to, if you got to fail, you got to fail, and you pick yourself right back up, and you keep on trying, you pick yourself up, because believe me, I've failed, I've fallen, and I've picked myself back up. And so that's what I would recommend to anybody who's young and who's planning their career, whether you want to be whatever you want to be, just follow that dream, and just keep on fighting hard. And it's not going to happen in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. It may take 30 years. But if you keep on that same path, and you're an example, you'll experience that success.
You're so true, so right. That's one of the things that I always tell people. It's funny, we tell them the same thing. When I see a young dentist, I said, look, make sure you start out with your ideals. Don't compromise because you think you're never going to make it. Just do that. Just continue. And life is a process. And what's going to happen, these other people that you thought were getting away with this or that, or you were incorrect, no, do what's right for people. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
And, we're both here of Latin descent, and, we have our Latin community, and Jorge will be putting this in closed caption in Spanish also for them. And so what I was going to ask you is this. For those of our Hispanic and really all immigrants, what are the important points that you could, off the cuff, say in general, let them know that would help them with their status and with their immigration to the United States?
Well, I am the son of an immigrant mom that immigrated here to the United States. So I'm a first-generation American, and I'm very sensitive to the challenges that immigrants face. And one of the things that I enjoy most is going to the interviews for spouses who are applying for their residency or citizenship, and to be part of that and to see them go through the questions and prevailing and passing their exams. And so, I think that the rules with respect to immigration, there are specific rules in order to gain legal status in the United States. We see that currently now in the U.S., we have a lot of people who have crossed the border undocumented, and they're trying to see how they can legalize their status. And my recommendation would be really, and we can't cover this in an interview tonight, but to go speak to an immigration attorney. Don't just go to any attorney down the street. Look out for an immigration attorney who specializes in citizenship, naturalization. If you came and they're facing deportation, that they're able to do deportation, and then sit down and maybe interview not one or two, interview as many as you feel confident that you say, all right, I can trust this person. I can, I could put my faith in that person will be able to represent me in any kind of application or petition that I have with immigration.
Beautiful. Well, I know it's going to help a lot of people who are out there watching, and do so. As we said before, the thing is not to procrastinate, not to put it off, and not to be afraid, but to, as Mr. Portela has said, go forward, seek that counsel from the attorney, and make sure that you get a specialist in immigration. So, I was going to ask you, because there's so many changes. I know my own field, there's so much coming out constantly now. How do you stay abreast? You have 3 offices, you have all these different fields that you're involved in. How do you stay current with all that's going on?
Yeah, it's really an ongoing learning process. That's one thing about law. You don't graduate law school and decide, okay, I'm practicing law and that school's over. It's an ongoing process. We are required to take ongoing continuing education classes. But in addition to that, we have at our firm, we have access to law libraries online that allows us to research recent case law and to any changes in the law. We're able to look that up and apply it to every specific case that we have. So it's an ongoing process. We're constantly learning, constantly improving our skills, and I would say that there's no end. I'm always researching online, especially now. And now they're coming out with new technology also, and I'm sure probably in dentistry also, but new technology, even reliable technology, and we will have to see with AI, artificial intelligence, where they're trying to help make what used to take double the time can save a lot of time, specifically designed for law firms. And so, the combination of the law libraries as well as the technology that's evolving now is what we're kind of open and receptive to apply in our practice in at the office.
Very good. And so now, one of the things that we were talking about a little bit is like a criminal conviction or whatever. So how does that impact someone who is here now in the U.S.? What do they do about that? Or how does that impact them? Or these, like you said, precedents that are occurring? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's whether you're a citizen or not a citizen, a criminal conviction has devastating effects on a person's record. I mean, it can affect them when they are applying for jobs, when they're applying for housing, when they're, even when they're traveling, and they're coming back as if they're not a U.S. citizen. They can be pulled into a room if they're a legal permanent resident, and depending on the conviction, they could actually be placed in removal proceedings. And so, if a person is an immigrant with no legal status in this country, it's even more dangerous because, the repercussions are even worse because person would be facing deportation and removal from the U.S. And so, you have a lot of these young kids who come to the U.S. at 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, live an entire life in New York, they're permanent residents and haven't become U.S. citizens by choosing, and then find themselves arrested for whatever reason that could have immigration consequences. And so that is a real devastating effect because there's nobody in the old country really to go back to. They're all here in New York or in the U.S. And so those are ways that criminal convictions can have a real impact on a person's life, whether you're a U.S. citizen or no legal status as an immigrant. And so I always recommend to clients who are permanent residents, if you've been living here most of your life, become a U.S. citizen. Why? Why not? Because then you have all the benefits of being an American citizen, and that includes everything from never, whether you get in trouble with the law or not, you'll always be a U.S. citizen. They can't remove that as comparison to a legal permanent resident. But also, you have certain privileges: the right to vote, and the right to run for office, the right to have public office, as a job. And so these are privileges that I think could really benefit, especially those that have been living their lives most of their lives here in the U.S.
Those are very, very good points. Some people let things go on and on and on, and they don't realize that they're losing time. Do you do, aside from the local level, do you also do state and federal cases?
Indeed, we do. In fact, this past week, I had a federal case in the District of New Jersey, and it was a federal criminal case. And so we do cases on the state and federal level, but mostly the federal level are mostly criminal cases that we do on the federal level.
Very, very interesting. And I saw you were a district attorney.
Yeah.
And we always watch those shows on television and whatever. So, what was it? A little bit. What was it like? Was it just like what you do now? Was it different or?
Interesting. Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, it's somewhat of a overwhelming experience coming out of law school and having that privilege of being an assistant district attorney. And you're so young. I mean, we're talking about 30 years ago, maybe around 30 years ago, maybe a little bit more.
Wow.
And so you come out of law school and you're given this immense privilege and really trust by the government to represent a community, whether it's Brooklyn, Queens, New York, or Staten Island, or the Bronx, and so you're representing the people or those that have been a victim of a crime.
Yes.
And you're ensuring that you're making sure that justice be served by the person who's being accused, especially when you have the evidence to show beyond a reasonable doubt that that person had committed the crime. And so that was the groundwork and the formation of really being a lawyer. Law school teaches you the theory. The district attorney taught you how to practice law, how to do an opening argument, a cross-examination, a direct examination, a summation. These are all very, very important aspects of litigation. And so this type of experience was tremendous experience. Also, we were able to be part of our assignments were to be in the investigation bureau, and we were going out on investigations in the middle of the night, usually on the type of articles that you would read on the front page of the New York Post, for example, or the New York Times. These are like high profile cases that we were going out and investigating. So this was really the groundwork of becoming a litigator. And then when you leave the district attorney's office and you practice criminal defense, it's pretty much very similar because, you're just handling it from a different perspective, from the defense.
Right.
And as they say, there's two sides to every story. The prosecution usually hears the story of the law enforcement and the victim, but then there's the side of the defendant. And, there's always two sides of the story and you have to hear it. And that's what the whole purpose of a trial is, so that the jury hears two sides of the story and then they reach their verdict of whether or not the person is guilty or innocent. And so it's a different perspective, it's a different approach than working for the government. But I think it's just as rewarding. In fact, I think I would say it's just as rewarding. They're both real privileges to be able to work as a prosecutor and to work as a defense attorney, especially when you feel that you really have made a difference in a person's life in trying to get them vindicated from something that they're falsely accused of, or even if they're guilty, to be able to reduce the charges where their lives aren't ruined completely.
Absolutely. That is so important, right?
Right.
Because who doesn't make a mistake in life?
Exactly.
And then to have someone like you who can, defend them, give them advice, and you're so important. What I would ask you is this, I'm curious myself, hopefully it would never occur, but if someone were to break into someone's home, or someone were to be on the grounds and trying to get into a home or whatever, and in that type of situation, what are the rights of the homeowner, of the person in that home? Are they just supposed to call the police and do nothing? How far could they go to defend themselves?
Yeah, and that's something that you have to look at the state that you're in, and see what kind of defenses that you can raise. But clearly, you have a right to defend your own home. Mm-hmm. The question comes down to whether or not the person's armed with a deadly weapon or not.
Let me ask you a question. Since you're the specialist, how are you supposed to know this?
Well, that's it. How you these circumstances are so, at the moment, if you put yourself in the position of the person who's the homeowner, right? They only have a matter of seconds to kind of make a decision as to how to act. To what extent can they, protect their property? Can they use deadly force, or are they supposed to use enough force to avoid, any harm to themselves or to anyone in the house? And so a lot of it depends on the circumstances of the case. I think it's something that needs to be analyzed very carefully. I don't want to just give you a blanket answer.
No.
But I would say that if the person enters into the home with deadly force, you'd be able to use deadly force to protect your home. If the person is just breaking into your home, but you see he's unarmed, he has nothing there, and he's kind of snooping around, then you would use as much force as necessary, contacting the police or using enough force necessary to restrain him. But these are kind of very specific circumstances that you can't just throw a blanket answer to and say, all right, this applies to everyone in every situation. Now, the sad thing is that many times defendants who get arrested for a crime, and I think that law enforcement also looks at these circumstances, and logically you would say, okay, well, if the person has deadly force, you have the right to defend yourself with deadly force. If the person enters into the house at the time, you have to assess the circumstances, and that's going to be a tough call, for everyone who's in that situation.
Very interesting. And now I noticed at the beginning of the show we spoke about this. Your firm has an emergency hotline.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because there's probably people who get into some kind of situation. So tell us a little bit about how it should be utilized, or what situations does that come into play in?
Yeah, it's interesting that most law offices are open from 9 to 6, 9 to 8. But in a case where a person is a criminal defense attorney, even in some cases involving car accident cases, which we handle car accident cases in a different department. There's another lawyer that specializes in that, but we handle those cases. Those are cases that need immediate attention. And so we opened up basically a 24-hour hotline where a person can call and explain the situation. There's a recent arrest, we need somebody. And we have attorneys available 24/7 to go and start contacting law enforcement, letting them know that person's represented, contacting the court, filing a notice of appearance, and being ready to go in front of the judge for the first court appearance. And that's something that is, I think it alleviates a lot of stress for the family members who know they want to help out their loved ones and need somebody right away. And so that's what we do. We have that available. Even if we don't pick up, you can text that number, and by texting that number, you'll get somebody responding relatively quickly.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very important, service that you're providing, because, when you get into a situation and you don't know what to do, now you call, that number, and the Portela Law Firm. And, what I was going to ask you is, because I see what you've done, your life journey, what are your future goals, regarding maybe some other office?
Yeah, I think that I'm very content right now with the way things are. And I think that the goal here is to just be able to let our clients know, and the public that live in the New York City, New York State, and Long Island area, that we're amenable, we're available, and we can get to them regardless of the offices, that we have enough resources to be able to meet their legal needs.
It sounds good to me. So I wanted to ask you the last question. As always happens when the show is interesting, it flies by. So we're at the end of the show, but we have about 45 seconds or so left. I wanted to ask you, what would you like to relay to our viewers as to, what advice you'd like to give them in whatever, event or situation? Yeah.
I think no one is immune to not having crisis in their life. No one is an exception to facing certain challenges. And when it comes to the government and when it comes to law enforcement, I think the saying goes that you always go for the best representation you can find. And the reason why is that the decisions that are reached and the results that are met can have long-lasting effects. And so I think that at one point or another, everyone faces a certain challenge where they're going to need legal services. And the important thing is to go to a lawyer that really knows his stuff, that is really has a reputation and a record to go by, which nowadays you can go on to the web and you can do your own research, and you're able to really get a better background of the individual that you're planning on hiring. While maybe 20 years ago it wasn't so easy, so you didn't have Google reviews, you didn't have Yelp, you didn't have Avvo. Avvo's a great site to find good lawyers in specific areas of practice. and you didn't have, you know, the commentaries of clients who basically say, you know, is this person reliable or not? And so I would say that that kind of research is something that's very helpful. But to do your due diligence, and if you can't find the attorney, go to an attorney who you find trustworthy online, and then just ask for a consultation. And if they can't handle it, that they'll guide you to the most competent person that they, in their professional opinion, they can find to help you deal with your legal problem.
Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. Oh, you're quite welcome. You know, thank you for taking the time. I know probably our viewers feel a lot better. I know I feel a lot better. And thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
And hopefully you'll never need either one of us. Have a very good night.
This show was sponsored by A Time for Truth Foundation Incorporated as a community service.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet